Yeah, so I mean, you're absolutely right, Marcus. We haven't left the European Union. We the ticket that we were all asked to put a cross against was, do you want the United Kingdom to leave the EU or to remain in the EU? There was no suggestion that Great Britain could leave and part of the UK would be left behind, or that the process of leaving the EU would actually require us to sign up to a whole load of EU laws, alignment in various other areas, and so on. It was a simple question. And Parliament stood and continues to stand, I think, to a significant extent, in opposition to the people. And I think as the people of the United Kingdom, we can be very proud of the fact that we voted to leave the EU. We were probably the first country to express as a country its desire to break from the liberal global order, of which, at the heart of which is the EU, amongst other organizations, to break from that liberal global order and to bring back control to the nation state of the United Kingdom. That's what the vote to leave the EU was. It was, for goodness sake, please, can we stop running the country along the lines of international treaties and international supranational organizations, and can we start doing it with British national interest at heart, with the British people's interest at heart? That's what that cry in 2016 was. And then in 2017 there was a general election, and again they voted for a Conservative Party that promised to get Brexit done. Then there was the European elections in 2019, and they voted to get Brexit done again by returning the Brexit Party in massive numbers to the European Parliament. And then in 2019, the entire election that Boris Johnson fought was on the issue of Brexit. And again, people voted to get Brexit done. So there were four elections or four plebiscites um, in which the people said, we want control back in the UK. And Boris Johnson's two deals that he delivered, first the withdrawal agreement and then the trade and cooperation agreement that came 11 months later, both of them failed to bring back control to the UK. And as you rightly say, Marcus, we left Northern Ireland behind. There's a border down the Irish Sea. And the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is embedded in the withdrawal agreement, doesn't just produce that Irish Sea border, it actually has a loop back into Great Britain, making it very difficult for Great Britain to, even if we wished simply for Great Britain to be independent of the EU, it makes it very difficult even for Great Britain to achieve that. And then along came the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, as I mentioned, 11 months later. And that signed the entire UK up to further alignment and further obligations to the EU. So, for example, we are not allowed to deviate from state aid laws, competition laws, employment laws, and environmental laws, including net zero, um, such as those laws were in December 2020 when we left the EU. We're committed to all those or that legal framework. And also in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement is a commitment that we will stay in the European Convention of Human Rights, even though the ECHR has nothing to do with the EU and the EU is not a member of the ECHR. In the treaty we signed with the EU, we've committed to staying in it. And also through that treaty, we've conceded the European arrest warrant, which means that if a Polish court, for example, issues an arrest warrant for a Polish individual, they can just reach into the UK and take that individual out without our courts being able to protect them. And the same applies for a British citizen, by the way. So if a European court were to issue an arrest warrant for Nigel Farage, it could just reach into the UK and take Nigel out without British courts being able to do much about it. That is not sovereignty. If our courts can't even protect our people, we haven't got sovereignty. So at multiple, and I can go on and on and on, by the way, but at multiple different levels, we have not left the EU. And people say, well, Brexit's been a disaster. Brexit hasn't succeeded. No, it's not that Brexit hasn't succeeded. It's that we haven't succeeded in leaving the EU. That's what's gone wrong. And so, in some senses, we've got the worst of all worlds because we've lost our representation in the institutions of the EU, the Commission, the Parliament, the Council, the European Court of Justice, and so on. We've lost our representation, but we're still hitched at the hip in a way that makes it impossible for us to do what's right for the UK. And one of my disagreements with Nigel Farage is that he says Brexit's done. We just haven't done it very well. And he's fundamentally wrong. And I think he needs to correct his language on that. Brexit's not done. It won't be done until we have left properly. And we should have done it the way Trump would have done it, the way Trump renegotiated the North America, the way the Free Trade Association, NAFTA. When he renegotiated NAFTA, what he did was just pull out and say, right, the US is out. These are the terms I require. And until he got the terms he wanted, NAFTA was suspended. And we should have just left the EU and said, sod it, we're out. Now let's have a deal. But we didn't have a political class that had the will to do that.
No.